Content warning. Things can get pretty rough in prison. We're going to be talking about some subjects that some people might find disturbing. Hi, I'm Amelia Saw and this is On Guard, a podcast about what really goes on inside prison. And it comes from the best source in town, the prison officers. Unlike police, who go out looking for the bad guys, each day a prison officer turns up at work, they're guaranteed to find them. Imagine doing a job where every shift was spent rubbing shoulders with Australia's worst criminals. These are the guys who keep the country's rapists, serial killers and child molesters exactly where the rest of us want them, locked away in prison. But you don't walk away from a job like that without scars. These guys have got stories. Some of them are shocking, some of them are tragic, and others are just bloody funny. The one thing I can guarantee is that you've never come across anything like it. In this episode, we meet Kerry Corbin, a former corrections officer who notched up 7 years working in Brisbane prisons. Most of his days were spent at Wolston Correctional Centre, a protection jail home to some of the country's most despicable paedophiles, sex offenders and kid killers. These are the guys with crimes so depraved, even other crims want them dead. During his shifts, Kerry got to know them personally. He even got close to Daniel Morcombe's killer, Brett Peter Cowan. Kerry retired in 2015 after he was brutally attacked by an inmate. His story is truly the stuff of nightmares, but he's been brave enough to share it with us today. Kerry, thanks for joining us. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad.
Now, you have spent many years rubbing shoulders with some pretty horrific people. But let's talk about Wolston, because that's where you spent the most time. Now, that's a protection prison, isn't it? What does it mean to be in a protection prison?
Protection prison would be basically you would get your young offenders that were probably, a bit worried about going into mainstream and being preyed on. You definitely get your sex offenders because if they get into mainstream, they're not going to last very long. And practically high-profile ones as well, very high-profile ones. And some of the people that are probably the sickest and depraved people in humanity, plus people with mental health issues. Mm-hmm. So
it sounds like, prison's obviously renowned as being a dark place, but this sounds like a pretty dark end of the spectrum.
Very, very much. And it is does take it out of you, like doing 12-hour shifts within a 50 to 55 man unit, and you're doing 12-hour shifts with these people, right in your face all the time, and you can't get away from it. It's basically there, and you've got to control it and manage it as best you can, and all you got's a radio and a little button.
And so these people who've kind of committed these horrendous, often sexual crimes or horrendous violence against women or little children, how do you as a person deal with being up close and personal with them?
That's the tricky one. This is the one that actually pretty much kind of eats at you. And if you don't either dissociate it or you can compartmentalize it, it will basically break you down. You end up as a raging alcoholic. I mean, to be honest, most of the people, officers in jail, are pretty much all divorced. And it's just the nature of the beast, unfortunately.
Do you have to, a lot of them had very high-profile crimes. When you're dealing with them face-to-face, do you have to put what they've actually done out of your mind to be able to interact with them?
Professionally, yes. Yes, that's exactly what we've got to do. But as human beings, is what we're doing, you sort of can't sort of wipe it out completely. You do your job to the letter, to as best of your ability, but what they've done is basically you can see it when you see them. You know what they've done and you can see it on them when they're around you.
Did any of them ever talk about their crimes with you?
Oh, yes, I've had lots of conversations. And one thing that you always get from prisoners was the fact is, it wasn't my fault. I'm innocent. I was set up. And yeah, they just don't claim responsibility for it. You do get some that are basically do switch it around and are actually, you can see them change and they want to get out and do things for the better. And they're the ones you try and help and push to get to do the programs to try and rehabilitate as best you can.
So there's definitely no remorse, you think, in most of the ones you've met?
No. I have never really seen any real empathy from any of them. I mean, ones that have made mistakes, yeah, fair enough, but the ones that have prayed and are just monsters and stuff, they just do what they're supposed to do so they can get parole to get out of there. And they use it. They know how to use the system.
Gosh, that's very disturbing to hear, isn't it? Particularly knowing that some of these people are out again, living in the community.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's go through some of the kind of more high-profile inmates in there, or who have called Wolston home. So there's Gerard Baden-Clay, who murdered his wife Alison in 2012, which was a very high-profile case. Her body was found in the creek, wasn't it?
Yeah.
There was Rick Thorburn, who he killed his foster daughter, Tiali Palmer. She was just 12, and that got kind of national attention as well for the horror of his crime. And then there's one that you had a little bit to deal with, which is Daniel Morecambe's killer, Brett Peter Cowan.
There are few crimes that have attracted as much public attention as the seemingly random abduction and murder of 13-year-old Daniel Morecambe in 2003. And today, more than a decade later, the killer has finally been brought to justice, with the jury finding 44-year-old Brett Peter Cowan guilty of murder.
Compelling evidence has found beyond reasonable doubt that a murderous sex offender, was caught and exposed for his actions.
Daniel's legacy will continue with the Daniel Morecambe Foundation, keeping kids safe. Thanks, guys, and it's a good result.
Well done. Can you tell us a bit about what you know about Brett Peter Cowan and also what you know of his crime? I know it's pretty well known, but just for anyone who's not familiar with it.
Well, to be honest, it staggers me for the fact that the Northern Territory ever let this man out for what he did in the Northern Territory. He should have been locked away for life for that. And
that was a rape in the Northern Territory, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, a very, very horrific rape. And,
yeah.
You know, he honestly should have been locked away for that.
Here's what 9 News had to say about Cowan on the day he was finally sentenced in 2014.
Today, Brett Peter Cowan was sentenced to life behind bars with a non-parole period of 20 years. The judge told Cowan he was beyond rehabilitation and should never be released.
It took more than 10 years to convict Brett Peter Cowan. It took less than an hour to lock him away for life. Everything about what you did to that child was horrific and disgraceful, said Justice Rosalind Atkinson. Cowan was yesterday convicted of indecently assaulting Daniel Morecambe, murdering him and interfering with his body. The standard non-parole period for murder is 15 years, but Justice Atkinson took into consideration Cowan's appalling criminal history, including taking a 7-year-old boy from a playground and molesting him in a toilet block, raping a 6-year-old boy in Darwin, leaving him with life-threatening injuries, abusing up to 30 children at a local swimming pool while just a child himself, plus a history of violent acts against former partners.
What actually hit home for me was when Daniel Morecambe happened and disappeared. I was a truck driver, and driving around, we seen the semi-trailers that had the Daniel Morecambe pictures up. He looked exactly like my nephew did at that age, and that kind of hit home to see. Yeah. Every time I seen it, it just reminded me straight much of my nephew. And so to go from that to finally seeing him behind a cell door was kind of very, very satisfying. Yeah.
When you first laid eyes on him, what was running through your mind?
It was, I don't know if you've ever been to a zoo and you've got like a very dangerous sort of animal that's sort of been hidden away, and you sort of drawn yourself slowly to the door to actually see this deadly animal to do. And that's exactly what it felt like to, just to draw myself in and just to picture the monster. Yeah.
Were you nervous?
No, not nervous at all. It was probably, I don't know, had just as much anger as what the families and the community had.
And what did you see when you was it a kind of, I mean, I'm imagining a door with a little kind of slit that you look through, but that's probably not what actually he was housed in.
No, he had a secure cell, and it's basically had the hatch where you put the food through, and we can handcuff them through. But there's a perspex window that you had a good look through, and stuff like that. And yeah, seen him.
Was he looking back at you?
No, not at all. He was, I would say, he was pretty shabby, and just sort of in his. I'm not too sure if he was in a suicide gown or anything like that at the time, but yeah, he was pretty much high profile on the watch just in case.
Right. And so when someone's on the watch, the phrase you just mentioned, that means you have to check in on them regularly to make sure they haven't self-harmed?
Well, they've got multiple watches and stuff like that, but if someone's on suicide watch, they're always on camera. They've got basically stuff that they can't tear to make anything nooses. There's nowhere to actually no hanging points in the there at all.
So with Brett Peter Cowan, so you saw him through the door. Why was he being kept separate from all the other prisoners? He's already in a protection prison.
Just because you're in a protection prison doesn't mean that you're always safe. We've got a lot of mainstream prisoners that basically have clocked on to the fact that, life's a lot easier when you come to protection. So they just make up little stories to get themselves onto protection, and, well, technically they don't need to be there, but, they're basically become a big shark in a small tank.
Yeah. You said with Cowan, he had his own TV and his own kind of, what else did he have in the cell?
Well, he would have had like a bookshelf where he would have put his clothes and his towel. He would have had his bed where he unlocked the room to go where he can have a shower. He can sort of walk around in the, covered in the area. He would have had that, and it's practically about it. Toilet and sink.
But it seems, it sounds at least relatively comfortable for someone who's committed such a kind of heinous crime.
Yeah, like I said, honestly, if the worst come to the worst for me and I had no money, I would quite happily go to jail for my retirement.
You think it looks like a good life in there?
It is a very good life in there. You got TV, you got your meals, you got your medical. Anything happens, you pretty much go to hospital pretty much straight away. So you got the preferential treatment where they push you through. There's no waiting lists. Your medication's all paid for.
Yeah, when you put it like that, it doesn't really sound like a punishment, does it?
No, it's not, unfortunately. Things are sort of, I know things back in the day were a bit grueling and a bit tough and regimented, and they've softened it up and gone too far the other way. But the sad thing is, if we try to go back to the hard line and take away the stuff that people got now, you are really going to have a shit fight.
Right. So how kind of locked down is it? These are very, very dangerous men. Are they free to walk around? How much freedom do they have?
It all depends if what units you're talking about, the secure units or the residential units.
Talk me through both.
Well, secure is just basically after head count. it's unlocked. They get their breakfast. They're all out. They're walking around, having their breakfast. Some will be getting ready to go to programs. Some will be getting ready to go to work. And some will just, go out and make their phone calls on that, go out into the exercise yard, and just wander around. A lot of them pretty much sat around, played cards, and, gambled. I know we sort of frown upon it, but you sort of can't stop it because that's the thing that they were doing, so keep themselves occupied. And if they wanted to go back into their room, they pretty much either went back into their room and locked the door.
Were there any escapes while you were working?
No. I think the closest we got was, I know you would have seen in the media about idiots that get up onto the roofs and protests and stuff like that. Yeah, just.
And what were those protests usually about?
Very inane things. They might have missed a visit, or they want to know why their contact visit was moved to a non-contact. Because I can honestly tell you that the treatment they got in the prison was very, very adequate and very good.
One prisoner Kerry did know well was convicted murderer Oliver Alinzik. In 1987, Alinzik murdered 26-year-old Sandra McKay in Murrayfield, Brisbane, devastating her family's lives. Also, he could steal $1,500 from her work safe. He went on to develop a reputation as a seasoned prison escapee, including one dramatic breakout in 1997 with postcard bandit Brendan Abbott.
He was a funny man. He was basically thought he was the sexiest man in the jail, and would oil himself up and sunbathe in the exercise yard, much to our disgust and the fact that you're contravening, put your shirt on, Ollie, and that. But yeah, he thought he was a very, very sexy man. I think what happened with his escape days, I think when he was at Barallan and he got run over by the PRV, that's the parole vehicle, and might have slowed him down a little bit. I think he changed from then. I think what happened at SDL with Brendan Abbott was...
What's SDL?
SDL was Sir David Longland's. That's where the escape happened with Brendan Abbott.
Right.
Brendan Abbott was a incredibly smart man, and he pretty much masterminded it and broke out with these other people, and basically they split off in their directions, and he went his way where everyone was looking for everyone else, and he quietly just snuck away. So yeah, I think
Brendan Abbott did.
Oh yeah, I think the other ones were pretty much just tag-alongs for to help us escape.
But Abbott, he was famous, wasn't he, as a postcard bandit, because while he was on the run, he used to, urban legend has it, he used to send the police postcards while he was a fugitive and just kind of taunt them, didn't he?
Yep, and take photos outside the police stations and leave them on the benches. Yeah.
Okay, so we've got Ollie Alinzik oiled up in the yard.
Yes.
Was that because he was trying to attract kind of attention from the other prisoners? Was he trying to pick up? What was going on?
Oh, God knows. That is the one thing. They do have a saying in jails and all the prisons, probably around Australia and around the world. It is just jail sex. Doesn't count when you're on the outside. What happens inside stays inside. It's just jail sex. But I think he was more than likely working on his tan.
Right. So now that you've brought up jail sex, let's go there.
Yep.
How much sex happens in prison?
Probably a lot more than I'd like to remember. There is consensual sex. We honestly don't condone it, and because of other things, and of course you've got the other ones that aren't consensual, and right. I think a lot of them have sort of come to light as a reason, and yeah, they're pretty bad. They're pretty bad. So Yes. There was a case of a wife that come for a visit, and her husband was away with his boyfriend and didn't want to come down and see his wife because he was spending time with her. And we had to escort the poor lady out of the centre crying and trying to console her while her husband was away with her boyfriend.
So how is it, if it's not condoned, how is it policed?
Well, we can't be everywhere at the same time, so they watch us more, just as much as what we watch them. And we have the little sayings that people be out on the balconies or the walkways, and they'll just give a little call out. We call them cockies, like cockatoos, to send a message out. And they'll put the message out when they see us walking around. You've got ducks on the pond, that's their saying, when officers are out walking.
So that's code for there's a prison guard around?
Yeah, officers are patrolling, ducks on the pond. Yes, so,
Wow.
It's very, very hard to sort of catch them out when you've got people sort of looking out for each other.
But where would it happen? In the rooms, I'm guessing?
Well, happen in the rooms, happen in the showers. Gosh, I'm sure it... on breaks in industries, who knows?
Right.
Yes.
But it's not, is it above, when I say it's above board, is it talked about or is it a hidden thing? Are people ashamed of?
Well, the openly gay people in there, they were quite happy to talk about it, and we're like, oh, for God's sake, we don't want to hear about this. We don't want to hear about it. But we were always pretty much had our fingers on the pulse to make sure that if anything was happening, it was consensual.
Right.
Because, the last thing that I wanted or anyone in the centres wanted was, something untoward.
Yeah, absolutely. So the prison also had a pretty well-known, in fact, he has the definition of being Australia's most dangerous living serial sex predator, a man called Raymond Garland. And you had a bit to do with him, I believe.
Yes, I've basically managed Ray many times, and I've heard stories from when he was at the road, Boggo Road, and
right.
And yeah, just remarkable to hear. Like I said, you're all nice and polite and respectful, and he was the same when he was around you, but you always kept your guard up and you always kept an eye out.
Right. So, I mean, one of his offences, he basically held a group of people hostage, didn't he, and subjected them to these really horrific sex attacks. 14 people were held hostage in Mackay. And he raped 3 of them, 2 women and a 16-year-old boy. But you're telling me your dealings with him, he was polite, respectful.
Yeah. And that is what we call in the prison system playing the game. And that's how they know. They play the game. Try and keep their, heads down and that, so they don't draw the attention. Or as we call it, bring on the crabs, calling the crabs in.
What does the crabs mean?
Well, basically, when you call on the crabs, you're calling in attention, and that usually means that something's going on. We call in the thing to come and do a ramper unit, where we just basically pull things apart, and that's when we find all the contraband and stuff that they're not to want to.
So Raymond Garland was just a kind of quietly spoken, average kind of inmate, is that right?
My dealings with him, yes. From what I heard about him at the Boggo Road, definitely a different creature.
Tell me some of those Boggo Road tales.
Oh, you really should talk to some of the Boggo Road staff there, because it was pretty bad. But I have heard that he intimidated a prisoner in the back of a van and got them to basically back up while in the transport van, and basically raped him through the dividing and the mesh and that.
Wow.
That would, anecdotally, so that's what I heard.
Yeah, well, he does have a reputation as being a pretty nasty human being, so it's probably not that surprising.
Well, we had the one that was before him.
Who's the one that was before him?
Well, they used to call him the Black Stallion. And he was pretty much like Ray Garland on steroids.
Arthur James Murdoch was dubbed the Black Stallion by fellow inmates for his insatiable sexual appetite. Murdoch was in jail almost continuously from 1953 for a series of rape and sodomy offences. He was considered so dangerous, he was kept in a weld mesh cage at Townsville Prison for more than 9 years before he was released into the wider prison community, after his jail conditions were exposed by media.
Very, very violent man, very intimidating man. And when I got to see him when I was at Wolston, he was just a gentile old man by then. And I just, dumbfounded by the fact that you've heard stories and the legends, and you basically see this person as a frail old man. It's like, what? He did that? No. But yeah, yes.
In a way, though, that's what makes these people so dangerous, isn't it? They're presenting like a nice kind of middle-aged or elderly man, quietly spoken, someone going about their business, and yet they're capable of committing these horrific acts. What is it, having spent so much time rubbing shoulders with pedophiles and sex offenders, is there a quality they all share? How can you pick one out?
They definitely have a look. Like, it sounds really weird, like I'm sure anyone that works in corrections can pretty much spot a prisoner and spot a predator and stuff like that, and in a mall and stuff is... like I told you before, they have a really weird sense of humour. It doesn't sort of gel, and they don't really get normal humour. And they...
what kind of... so that would they tell kind of sick jokes or...
Well, it's not even sick jokes. It's like very immature jokes that just don't seem funny or don't have a punchline. And it's
interesting.
Like, okay, yeah. And honestly... you could pretty much
strange social skills.
Strange social skills, stuff like that. And if you go anywhere and if you stay still enough and you watch people, and you watch people watching people, that is the ones that you can pick up. And you know that, hang on, there's something else about that person. They'll be taking an interest in someone, but trying to show that they're not showing an interest in that person. This is the thing I said about them getting pre-armed when they're doing these courses is basically gives them strategies to deal with stuff, but it also gives them the strategies to pretend that they're normal and human.
I see. So what you're saying from that is you could, for example, go down to your local supermarket complex, shopping centre, and look around the crowd and you think there would potentially be people standing on the outskirts, demonstrating this behaviour. You would be able to pick them out, I suppose, is what I'm asking.
Pretty much most of the time I could probably notice them. Like I said,
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time with them, and like I said, I interviewed quite a lot of prisoners as well from different sort of walks of life, different crimes, and yeah, it's it's very, very scary for me when I walk out and I see young ladies walking around in skimpy clothes, and I'm like, you don't know what the predators are that are out there, and I'm on the look the whole time, just looking out for them.
Wow. Like a kind of sixth sense, a sixth awareness for these kind of sex offenders.
Oh, yeah, it is. It is. The sad thing about, from what I know, statistics is most of the sex offenders and stuff that come are family members. So you can't pick those. But the predator ones that have actually got it down packed and are basically very well versed in it, they are the ones that are very haunting, and they are the ones that I never ever want to see get out.
There was one man who was in there when you were in there, a guy called Frankie Houdini, who was an escapologist, which obviously can't be can't be well, served him well in prison, or perhaps served him very well. But he was also a child entertainer. He was a magician, wasn't he? He used to lure teenage girls back into his premises, I suppose, and promise them a modelling career before he'd basically molest them.
Yeah. Well, like I said, the Frankie that I seen was he had long hair and a beard, and he'd walk around and, please and thank you and that, and then come around and offer us lollies, would you like some lollies? And no, we're fine, thank you. And just walk around, everyone said, you'd see he'd bow to you and that. He's just funny little man.
Did he have many friends?
Well, I mean, from what I've seen, I know he did a lot of education. He was always in education and stuff like that, so I don't know what he was learning or his books. And basically, if you're I think he was in residential at the time, so he would have been with a close-knit group of people and stuff, so he would have had to have been.
So just explain what residential is. It's a group of cells all together?
Well, they're not really cells. They're more like dormitories. And
Right.
They basically all got a key to their little dormitory in this. They got a common area. They got the front door and the grill's basically security grill. We got a magnetic lock that's controlled by master controls. And we can get the keys to unlock them and go in and check out the cells and stuff like that. But yeah, they can sort of come and go whenever they want, really, except for when they're
Sounds
locked
like
in.
quite a lot of freedom.
Very much a lot of freedom, but that's where you basically work your way through the system and secure to actually show that you are worthy of being a residential prisoner.
Right. So Frankie Houdini, he was eventually found in his cell, wasn't he? He had committed suicide.
Yeah, that's what I heard, yes.
Was that do you know if that was related to the treatment he was having, or?
The programs that they do are very confronting, and part of, from what I understand, part of what they have to do is they basically have to confront their offending and about the offenders, and they get insights into what they've done and the victim impacts from it, and it can be pretty hard and a bit brutal. There was another prisoner that was going through I can't remember his name, going through the same process, and he ended up committing suicide as well because he couldn't handle it, what he'd done.
Yeah, I suppose it would be very confronting. So, how has it changed your outlook on the world doing this line of work? Does it make you trust people less? You mentioned before when you go out on the street, you're always kind of looking around, I suppose, scoping in front of you for potential dangers. How has it changed you?
It's changed me a hell of a lot. The job pretty much takes away all the good of humanity because you've only seen the bad, like the really bad. Hyper vigilant, yes, because you're always looking at your peripherals, because that's how we learned in the jail, was to keep looking at the sides, because that's where the action happened. It doesn't happen at the front, it's sort of here and behind you. And so hyper vigilant, and just basically no real faith in humanity, just always saw the dark side. And yeah, it left me very, very, very depressed.
Yeah.
Very depressed.
Yeah. And you had a pretty horrific experience yourself, didn't you?
Yeah, I did in 2013.
And so what happened with that?
The assault?
Yeah, you were attacked by an inmate.
I was going about doing my job, and I noticed a prisoner smoking in the unit, which at that time you could smoke in the centres, but not in the unit, because I was sitting down playing cards, and I basically yelled at him and said, put your effing cigarette out, Sean. And he, went like that. It was fine. And then I had to carry on and do my paperwork. We got believe it or not, officers' workload with the paperwork we get is just horrific. To get everything done during a day is just a nightmare. So I basically looked up again, and here he was leaning right back on his chair, having a big puff, and then exhaling. And I thought, great, he's just put me on show. These cameras are recording now. So I had to basically go up and approach him, keep my eye on him because I was looking to see where he had the lighter, and basically approached him. I said, pack your shit up, get outside now, pack your car game up. And he didn't want to do it. I said, no, pack your stuff up and do it. He didn't want to do it again. And I said, look, I'm giving you an order. I'm going to take these cards off you and get outside. And then at that point he jumped up and he was huffing and puffing, and I was looking at basically a unit full of people on a card table, and I got a guy over here huffing and puffing. He took his shirt off. He was still huffing and puffing. He basically went up, went in front of me, pretty much to the side of me, still telling the people, look, hurry up and pack it up. And that's pretty much when he come and quickly smashed me 3 times, quickly in a row. I got one here, one in my eye, and the one that split my lid open that basically, caused the massive amount of blood. And he basically backed away from me, and I went to go grab him, subdue him. I didn't want to do anything like punch him back or use any illegal takedowns, because we've had other officers that got in trouble for that, and they were basically stood down. And what happened was, because I was bleeding so badly, it pulled on the shiny vinyl floor. He just basically pushed me backwards, and he was skating me around on my own blood on the floor. And then we smashed into a concrete wall, onto the plastic bin where they keep all their breakfast stuff. Then we started hitting the basically the steel tables and chairs. So I think there was about 2 or 3 of those. Then I smashed onto a table again, and then smashed onto a chair before we hit the ground. And I think he was still hitting me. And then my partner come running in from the exercise yard, and he jumped onto him. And then I pretty much blacked out. And then the next thing I remember is coming to, and they had officers responding, coming through. And then I stood up, and I managed to get the handcuffs off. And I got to handcuff him in front of him. Like I said, I still had blood streaming from my face. I was trying to talk. I couldn't understand why I couldn't talk until I got in the mirror, and I had this big gaping wound.
Wow.
I think it was about 4 or 5 stitches to close it.
Yeah.
And, unfortunately left me with pretty much long-term injuries.
Yeah, it's a horrific thing to go through. I'm sorry that's happened, because it's no one in any line of work should be subjected to that kind of attack, should they?
No, not when we were supposed to just be doing our job. The other thing is, I've always been a good officer. I've had other prisoners tell me that I'm one of the good ones. And the worst part was basically the treatment I got from the department themselves.
Right. Yeah. Which was what?
Well, basically going through the court system to try and get help, because now I've got a brain injury. I've got a neurological movement disorder. I've got PTSD, panic attacks, and basically, living as a hermit basically in my own home and trying to get help for it. And they didn't want to come to the party.
Now, time for the prison pop quiz. Each episode, I ask a corrections officer to decode the weird, the wacky and the wonderful of prison slang. They're the words and phrases you'd only know if you'd spent time behind bars. And trust me, some of them are truly disgusting. for a lot of people, we will be completely confused by some of the terms that I understand are thrown around. So give us a bit of a prison dictionary.
Well, you've got bronze up.
Yeah, and what does that mean?
Well, that's basically mean when someone covers themselves in feces.
Oh, is that common?
Surprisingly, yes.
Oh gosh.
You got
What else?
banking. You got banking, where someone would secrete something in their butt. We're talking like cell phones, chargers, syringes, drugs, tattoo guns, parts for tattoo guns, yeah.
And the mind boggles about what can fit in there.
Oh, you'd be surprised. We're talking like the old school 1980s phones.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
All right, give me two more.
Right, you got a cat.
What's that?
That's basically like someone you would call a homosexual was a cat.
Right. Okay.
And I'm just trying to think what else they have. They are actually quite funny when you get to know them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you run into someone and they call you, well, they'll call you ma'am, but if you're a guy and they call you boss or chief, they've been to prison.
Oh, really?
Yep.
That's interesting. There's a way to tell people.
Oh, yeah.
Secret code.
Yep.
Kerry, thank you very much for chatting to me. You've been so interesting on such a range of topics.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you taking the time.
No, I appreciate it too. Well, like I said, it's nice to get, the dirty little secret of the justice system out into the community to get some understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. And all the frontline stuff as well. I mean, we just don't... The average person just doesn't have, knowledge of what it's like to rub shoulders with literally hundreds of sex offenders. So thank you very much for sharing your experience.
Yeah. And trust me, it's nothing like you see on TV.
No. All right. Thank you very much. I think we'll leave it there. But good to talk, and I'll talk to you later on.
No problems. Thank you.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Kerry has been both physically and psychologically damaged from his time working in prisons. It's left him asking the question, how do you unscrew a screw? In episode 2, we meet Alan Butler, a former prison officer with 32 years' experience working in New South Wales prisons. His passion was busting corruption and sniffing out crooked officers. And he's not afraid to dish the dirt. He'll tell us about staff affairs with inmates and the crazy lengths people go to get drugs smuggled into prison.